This is the Hofstra Radio Alumni Audio Yearbook. Today is July 29th, 2024. Please tell us your name and the years you were at Hofstra Radio.
I'm Jon Sanelli, and I was at Hofstra Radio between 2017 and 2021. And I enjoy coming back and demoing technology for the students and attending WRHU events and Tech Thursdays hosted by Andy Gladding and diving into technology and meeting students. It's very much a continuous link.
Awesome. Oh, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for doing this and taking some time to share your stories. If you don't mind, could you tell us what shows or programs you mostly worked with during your time as a student?
Everything. Election Night, Islanders, the Engineering the Well Said podcast for the medical school with Dr. Ira Nash, the Belmont Stakes, NCAA, community shows like the Long Island Show, mostly all at a technical capacity. And the first thing I did was the Long Island Ducks, the minor league baseball team, the summer before college. And I was just very excited to be a part of something so professional and pushing the limits of technology and the industry. And I kind of did a lot, everything.
Very cool. Did you have any titles or positions at the station?
Yeah, official title was technical engineer. I did that for 2 years. That was on the administrative board. And I loved the role because I could always be involved with technology and not defined to one department. There was sports, music, news. And, I'd done a lot of music in high school and setting up for bands. And I would make schematics for live bands and sports. I remember going for a tour at the old Yankee Stadium, walking on the warning track, as a little kid, and
Wow.
seeing Sparky at the Islanders mascot for the NHL, seeing Sparky at the local sporting goods store. But anyway, that role, technical engineer, kind of allowed me to encompass everything that I wanted to do and be a part of everything, and I love that.
Okay. When you were on the air, did you have any nicknames or personas, or did you just go by your own name?
No nicknames. No.
Okay. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. And you mentioned a little bit about getting your start, but I like to ask a two-part question about how people got started at the station. And part of it is, what was the station like when you first got there? Do you remember meeting people? Do you remember what it looked like, what it smelled like? But mainly, what was it that drew you and brought you to Hofstra Radio?
Oh, it just felt right. I remember going for the orientation, while in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing John Mullen in a suit in the rotunda outside the studios at the Herbert School. And I remember he said there's three arms of the industry. There's sales, talent, and technology. And, I was there with my dad, and we thought that was, this was the first person who was telling us, while looking for a college, the first person that was telling us about after college.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else was talking about, here you're going to do this and here you're going to do that. But he was just very concerned. John's very concerned about, what do you do after college and WRHU? And we admired that. And it just felt like the continuation of my journey. And the station was very electric. I remember seeing all the awards. There was Remote Technical Productions, Press Club Awards, the Belmont Stakes, election nights, national conventions, NHL broadcasts, everything you could think of. And it felt like a very grounded, but with an incline, which I thought was very important. And I remember the energy was definitely electric. There was the Breslin Hall was across the way, which is where the training class was. And the buildup of the student management really you could tell where they were and what they were doing, and they really built up the station. And there was this buildup of potential energy, when you the training class being in a separate location than the station, almost had this tension that when you were done with the training class, I remember just wanted to. It was 9:00 at night, but you just want to go back that day, that week, the next day. I remember meeting Andy. That was a big thing for me because so in elementary school I had there was a band teacher, band being saxophones, trombones, and things like that. And there was a band teacher who was very cool, and everybody liked him. His name was Mr. Gladding, and Mr. Gladding would play the electric bass in front of the bands. And before you involved in the music department, you kind of watched the bands, and you just wanted to be in band. It was so fun. So I'd met Andy, and I knew that he was into music, very much into music. So I asked him, like, do you know Mr. Gladding? He was my music teacher. It wasn't my direct music teacher, but he was in the department. I said, do you know Mr. Gladding? And he goes, that's my dad. So yeah, that was a good link there. And I remember hearing his server room, his office. You would hear the racks screaming, down the hall. You knew he was there when the door was open, um, and there was such an energy. There was Greg Bacali, who graduated already and was working at Warner Brothers, and as an engineer there, he would come back and show us things. And some of the people in the class, or teaching the class, I remember the sports director was Nick Faria, who's now doing great things with the Eagles and the NFL. There was Maria Santana, who's now, I believe, doing things with the Air Force, and Steph Ruscio, who was personnel, I believe, at the time, and she's done work with the Super Bowl, and just heavy hitters, and there was so much energy. We wanted to dive right in.
If I could go back for a second, and forgive me if I don't get the phrasing exactly right, but it just really grabbed me when you said it, that when you first were checking out the station and the awards and all the stuff you said, it seemed very grounded, but there was an incline or something to that effect. What did you mean by that?
Oh yeah, grounded. I guess I mean by I mean that it was official feeling
Mm.
and substantial. That's definitely a draw, but also tons of things to do and get better at. And that's what I think I mean. There was plenty of opportunity and people to
Mm.
meet, and yeah, that was very exciting.
Hmm. I love the image of that you're starting off at this basic level of not, some people come in with some knowledge of radio or broadcasting, but that you have this opportunity to advance and to challenge yourself. That's the image that I got, that as you spend more time there, you try more things out and you challenge yourself and push yourself to be a better broadcaster and a better student and so on and so forth. So that was really neat. I thank you for sharing that and articulating that way. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So, were you thinking before you came to Hofstra of going into radio or broadcasting? What was your interest and how did you get to the station?
Yeah, I'd done TV studio classes in high school, and they would film orchestras and sports events and every sport at the school. And I was very involved with that and editing and audio softwares. And I was very much into that. The idea of making a project happen, and every concert and video project is a great prerequisite for the industry, and I remember just loving the idea of, you know, building a show and wrapping up a show and thinking of what goes into either a multi-camera show or a live music show. And like I said before, I remember we would practice for bands, guitar, bass, electric instruments. And I remember like drawing a schematic of like where the amps were and the microphones and the basic layout, and I mean, that was great prerequisite for broadcast engineering and what I eventually and ended up doing at the radio station.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. Okay. So you decide to come to Hofstra and John Mullen, I assume you do an interview and you get invited to come in. John and everybody is going to lead the fabled training class. What do you remember about that class?
Oh, I remember it. Yeah, it was very exciting. It was very official. You'd go there and, I think John would introduce it, and you had these. It was different from a regular class because you had students teaching it that you would eventually, be like, in a couple years' time, or even shorter, and there was something special about that, John would sit in the back and Bruce would sit in the back for the most part, and you're hearing from Nick or Kenny Conrad or Madison Wright or people that have been down the road already and still had a road ahead of them.
Mm.
Um, and it was very exciting. And then Bruce would go down there and uh, give his official speech. And again, it laid the road of like, wow, I want to go talk to Bruce, this week, tomorrow I want to go talk to Bruce in his office, and I want to go talk to the sports department or the music department personnel after the training class, and they laid the ground for you to be ready to go at the station. It
Hmm.
was very very energizing.
Hmm. It wasn't, you didn't find it intimidating?
No, not very intimidating, but very like wind lifting you up, kind of.
Mhm.
Like you saw what they were doing, and you wanted to do that.
So inspiring almost instead of intimidating. It's like, oh, this
Yes.
is a cool thing. I want to do this. And you're meeting Bruce Avery and John Mullen and Andy Gladding. And I mean, those are they are great broadcast professionals. They're great teachers and leaders. So what an environment you were stepping into. This did you know at the time? Did you get the feeling that it was going to be something special for you?
Yes, I remember like studying for the test at the end of the training class. I remember studying for that. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is one of the hardest things the most effort I ever put into a test,
Mm.
And I remember feeling how much passion I had for it. And that was the validator of, I knew that this would be something special.
Hmm. That's fantastic. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a little detour because I was thinking about when we were emailing before our conversation. You mentioned you might have had you have a family connection to Hofstra Radio back before even it was WVHC. Do you mind talking
Yes.
about that?
Yeah. So my grandpa, he went to WHCH when it first started. He was on the campus. And I remember, so I had interviewed him while I was a student. And that was no reason for me to go to the radio station. Like, I think I knew it, and it wasn't something that he pushed for or anything. It was just there was so much. It was so much more primitive back then, at the station. But I had interviewed him while I was a student, and then he had passed away actually maybe a year after that or less. But he had shared these stories. I remember he was there, and he remembers the posting of the WHCH, and he commuted from Brooklyn, and he brought his discs, as he called it, his records,
Mm,
and he would play them, and they were in like he called it a Quonset hut, which is like a prefabricated building that they had in the army, made out of. It was like kind of like a longhouse
right.
sort of thing, and um, I remember they didn't really broadcast very far, and they got a letter from a lady in Westbury, he thinks, who heard them, and they were very impressed with that distance that they were able to reach her. Um, and that was it. Yeah, he was there for the start. He was there for the start.
Wow. And what was his name?
Lenny. Yep, yep. And he
Wow.
and he was talking to me about it like uh, dear to him, and it had grown so much by the time I was there, and it was very cool to talk to him about it.
Wow, that's amazing. I love to hear about different generations spending time at the station, and I think you said you fortunately your grandfather didn't live long enough to see or hear you at the station, but I'm sure the legacy is appreciated and the continuation. That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and it makes you think like, if he would have seen what it was like, 40 years ago, he would have been impressed. Let alone what it has become as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a long history of Hofstra Radio struggling to get by and borrowing equipment and hand me downs and doing all the things necessary. And then in the last, let's say, 30 years, 25, more like it, 25 to 30, there's been a much bigger investment from the university and now the world class studios, which it sounds like you certainly took advantage of. It sounded like you were involved in so many things, and that's wonderful. But I want to see if you can remember, if not exactly the first time, but do you remember getting on the air the first time, or what your feelings or ideas were about that?
It felt empowering. I remember doing Newsline, um, but the people around you who were also doing Newsline, who were older, made you feel relaxed.
Hmm.
Like there was Brittany McGowan, who's now doing social media at Hofstra, and Gina Centillo, who's doing AMC networks, and Kim Donahue, who's the news director at the time. She's now a reporter in St. Louis, and there was just so many people into it that would show you how it was done. Um, I don't remember a specific moment of being on the air for the first time, but there was just an energy of being in the studio and looking at your friends you know uh, going on for the first time and carrying through with the broadcast and finishing and wrapping it up and doing post-mortems of a review of the news line. Yeah, very exciting.
Hmm, that's great. When I want to go back again to something you said earlier. I don't know if it'd be fair to say, did you spend more time, let's say, behind the scenes doing the technical aspect or board opping than on air, or was it a mix of both?
Yeah, by the time I had been a sophomore, I was in technology, like behind the scenes,
Hmm.
for the most part. And I did that. I went into Newsline and other shows speaking on air because it was kind of the way to be involved. But then I knew that I liked technology, and then I kind of veered into it, and that was a great decision for myself. And um, it was.
Mm. So I imagine you were working a lot with Andy Gladding, and Andy's one of those people that I only hear good things about and fun things about. How did he work as a mentor or leader in that area and getting you more involved?
He wouldn't tell you things if you just sat there.
Hmm.
I learned, you had to gain questions and study devices and technologies and workflows, and then bring it to him, present it to him with a question, so he had something to work with, and that applies to jobs after Hofstra. But I remember one time I was in his office and I was coiling a cable or something, and I think I was a junior, senior, and there were some engineers who we had known that he had introduced me to. I'd work with um, several alumni and people who had passed away. And I remember uh, Andy said very simply, "That's part of the deal." You know what I mean? It's part of the deal. It's what happens. We're human beings, and that's kind of like what you got when you were, as in his presence, a kind of more of an understanding of how students work and um, hiring managers and management and other students. And it was more than technology. It was people too, and we valued that. It wasn't just me. People would
Hmm.
come to him with problems about internships or positions or things that they were worried about, and he would break it down. He would pull it apart and kind of zoom out for a little bit, you know, uh, while also being so involved in the detail of the technology. It was a very nice experience to have.
Hmm. So it's not just about the technology or the on-air broadcast. It's about life. It's about social skills. It's about practical thinking about your career.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was like I said before, it was John and Andy and Bruce had this thing where, and the professionals and residents as well. Like, this is a great place to be, and it's legendary, but there's life after here, of course, and they were great ambassadors to the world outside of Hofstra.
Hmm.
All the stories that John would say about his radio industry and Andy would say, about his time. And, you know, remember too, like Andy worked elsewhere at the same time and would bring in alumni, and they were windows and doors to the outside, which was a great thing to be around.
Absolutely. You've mentioned so many wonderful names, and obviously Bruce and John and Andy. Um, when was there a moment or a time period where you thought, okay, I feel socially comfortable here. I realize these are my people and this is my environment. Was there ever a light bulb moment, or did you just feel comfortable at the station at some point and say, yeah, I'm here. This is what I'm doing?
Yeah, the latter, I would say. Yeah, you were just there, and you were just around other people who were also there
Yeah.
all the time. and it was this, Darwinian kind of, oh, you're here too, I'm here too, kind of thing. And like I remember writing for Newsline like a lot, like that freshman year, and
Yeah.
just being in the main office all the time. And that was your social life too at the station. That's who you knew. You went after class. I heard it time and time again on your episodes of, after class you went to the radio station. Before class you went to the radio station. Yeah, I don't remember a distinct moment, but definitely for sure I felt it.
Hmm. Do you remember any of the other students who were in that initial training program with you when you started? You mentioned some of the people who were teaching, but do you remember anybody who sort of you came up with and felt comfortable with?
Yeah, there was. Now I may name some names who were in maybe a training class afterwards. I kind of blurred together, but I would try to remember my best. There was Grant Francis, who is doing great work with the NHL and the St. Louis Blues now. I remember Andrew Murdolo, who's worked with Fox. I think Jason Siegel was in that class,
Hmm.
a news producer, and who else? So many people, so many great people. Stephen Giorno, who's done work with Fox since, and I think Natalie Kite was in that class. So many people that you kind of just grow with, and you left the training class and you were into it as well. You were there, you lived there.
I think it's very laudable and commendable and impressive that not only do you remember a lot of people's names, but you remember what they're doing since they've left the station, and this person's doing this and this person's there. That's pretty impressive. I don't think everybody can remember that. So a little pat on the back for yourself there. That's pretty cool.
No, yeah, I think it's good to people weren't as they were at the station stuck in time, and
Yeah.
people graduate and grow, and I just think it's good to know how people have grown, and it defines how you see them as well,
Hmm.
and I think that's very important. And like when you're at the station, there's people around, and you look back and you say, what they were doing back then is a great tell of what they've done, and all the great things they've done after, and it's fun to think about, meeting people in the training class, and it was all ahead of us, and we grew into upperclassmen and graduated, and you see them in a different light as well.
Hmm. And I think that goes back to some of the things that John and Andy said to you when you were training is that, and not directly in these quotes, but, this isn't just about here or about this show or this game. It's about your life. It's about thinking about beyond yourself and improving yourself and expanding your horizons. So you really took that stuff to heart. That's great to hear.
Yes.
Cool. So we talked about socially feeling comfortable and grounded at the station, but what about technically, or being on the air or being behind the board or whatever? Was there a light bulb moment or a point where you said, "Yeah, I'm good at this. I really feel comfortable and good about what I'm doing."
Yeah, we did like these big shows, election night shows. I
Mm,
previously had when I was a freshman and sophomore was these, the radio station had just done election night, but I'm sure your other interviewees had said that we'd done Hofstra Votes Live, and that was a big show. That was proposed by the dean, I believe, Dean Lukashevitz,
hmm
and it was this big show. And we did two of them while I was there. The second one was post COVID, and it was this huge challenge that we had to do. And by going through that challenge, you like you nailed it, and we all did, and it was that nailed in the comfortability at the station. Feeling very confident about what you can do, and we had like all these studios going. An engineer and maybe a couple anchors in Studio North. Same thing in Studio South. We had a camera and lights in the mix site. We had several anchors in the main office and lights and cameras and a little control room that was going back to the TV department because they were part of it as well. They had their broadcast studios, and it was this huge multicast. And we had workflows, and we had other students involved, other technical students. There was Ed Mabiza and Mike Corzin and several other people that were just involved in making it work. And that was one of those moments where you're like, like WRHU baby,
Hmm.
this is where I am. I remember that. That was very cool.
Mm. And to go back again, imagining a conversation with your grandfather about, where he started with WHCH and the concert hut and the technology of the time, and then what you guys were doing and able to do in all these different departments and all these different technologies working together. What a journey! What a great way to see the growth of the radio station in the community. It's just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Hmm. We've kind of talked about this a little bit throughout the conversation, but I like to double back and talk about this here. If you could think about yourself at 18 and joining the station, and after that first tour and that meeting, what did you at that point hope Hofstra Radio would mean to you, and what did it become?
It meant a place to live, a place to be all the time. I remember feeling like, this is the road, and I just have to walk and run on it, and um, it was we lived there. We did everything. I remember going to field trips and Entercom and iHeart with Danielle DeLillo, and making packages, uh, going to the Barclays Center with Lyanne. I know you interviewed, and uh,
Hmm.
NHL shows, MLB shows, and oh my God, so many things that you would have, that's standing there in front of John, at orientation. Um, if I told myself that I would be doing all those things, it would have been amazing, and we did them. We did them. I remember studying. I was there all the time. I remember studying in the mix site, and it was during finals, and I had my laptop, and it was like 7 in the morning. Like I'd gone to school and just gone to the radio station, and I was blasting music on the speakers.
Hmm.
Don't ask me how I studied with the music on, but I remember I heard Bruce walk in, like he was doing his morning checks, or around the station, and I remember he just started cracking up, and I turned down the music, and I was like, "What's so funny, Bruce?" And he's like, I remember he said, that's what college kids are supposed to do, jam out. They had this understanding of us and college kids, and everything that we experienced, and yeah, we all live there, and I'm glad to say that we made it happen.
Wow, what a beautiful story, and what a great journey. Um, Thank you so much for that, and I love that story about Bruce. I can't wait to listen back to that. Thank you, yeah, so much. We just barely sort of hinted at your upperclassmen years and the COVID years and things like that. If you don't mind, maybe we can do this again, and you can tell some more stories.
Yeah, absolutely. They're doing so many things at the radio station. Uh, so many great new things, technology wise, and else, in other areas as well. And this was a great conversation. But by the way, Brian, I think this is a great idea for a podcast. You could. I love enjoying listening to other alumni, and hey, maybe next time we could have hot wings.
That's that challenge accepted. We'll have to get together in person and try that out. And
An array of varying intensities of hot wings.
all right, yeah, that's what to borrow an idea. We haven't done that yet. It's an audio medium, but we'll make it work somehow. We'll figure it out. This has been so much fun, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.